All right. Hey, welcome to our podcast. It's called Never Broke Again. You're already here. And my name's Andrew, the mortgage cowboy. We've got Josh Krafchick, the unconventional money guy, and Mike O'Donnell, the number one solar sales rep in the world. Name Mike that you go by?
I go by MOD.
Okay.
MOD, correct.
Okay.
Michael O'Donnell. Michael. So I'm in addition to being in the Sun Solar Solutions solar company, I run an academy called the MOD Sales Academy. The MOD is Michael O'Donnell.
Mod. Got it. So the concept of this podcast is Never Broke Again. Basically, skill sets for people to learn and learn. Hey, what skill sets, or as Brad would call them, have you learned over the years that will basically enable you to never go broke again? And clearly, that's sales, right? Is there anything any that you can chat about here with us?
I'd say the primary skill set in never going broke again would be accumulating lots of money.
And what do you
So I'm pretty sure
what do you
I'm pretty sure I have. I'm super conservative, so I've got probably 90% of my net worth in real estate and super conservative mutual funds. So I'm not crypto guy. I just went to a conference this weekend I spoke at, and they had that investor guy who's got the money in crypto and Pokemon cards and all this kind of stuff. I'm really interested in moving into multifamily homes, joining some groups that are, putting together funds that are taking down fourplexes and small apartment complexes and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm moving next. But I own a fair amount of real estate. I own all of it, and I have no mortgages, which is the anti-leverage, probably anti-smart guy
Sure.
way to do it. But I literally think I probably would have difficulty going broke again, having several $1 million in real estate with no mortgages. So
you took all your income. How many pieces of property do you own?
I think I own 5 pieces of property. I own a rental property, my home, a vacation home, and then some raw land. Actually, two. I just added another. I'll just my anti-leverage. I have a $600,000 rental home in Phoenix, which is a pretty nice property, and I paid cash for it, which is just completely stupid, right? But
Yeah.
that's just what I did.
Can you move over like just a little bit? Move over.
Yeah.
Your left.
This way or this way?
Left. To your left.
Yeah.
To your
You
left.
got it.
A little bit more.
This way?
Nope.
We got you.
Yeah.
I don't see my view, so I'm having trouble seeing what you're seeing. So
Yeah, we got you. You're centered.
how's that? Is that good?
Yeah,
A lot of
All right.
those look like door knocking.
Yeah, so the industry award in the door-to-door space is called Door to Door Con, right? That's the group. I'm part of a mastermind of people in that space as well. It's sort of the higher level of that group is the circle mastermind. That's why I just came back from Guatemala on our annual international retreat, where we were kind of communing with some awesome minds on top of a volcano over a killer lake in Guatemala. But annually, me and my team go to a conference called DDD Con, and people who are achieving at the highest levels get a trophy in the solar space. That trophy has always been given out for 1 megawatt, 1 million watts a year. And when I showed up at that conference for the first time in 2017, they were kind of getting the list of people who would be receiving that award, and what did you sell, and on that year I sold 2.56 million watts of solar, kind of writing that down. And the guy Sam Taggart, who's the CEO, he's like no, this isn't for the company. How much did you personally sell? And I said, no, my company did more. Our company did probably 7 or 8 million watts of solar that year. That 2.56 million is my sales. And so he's like, wow, that's kind of weird, because like killing it, crushing it's $1 million. We don't have an award for 2.5 of that. So when I came up that night to the award ceremony, he handed me 2 of them. So each one of those represents 1 million watts of sales. That was the beginning of something that didn't exist, which was called the Double Golden Door Award. So I won that in 2017, 2018, 2019, last year in 2020. So I'm on track to do over 2 million watts of solar again this year. So
Nice.
that is the Golden Door Award. That's it.
What's the environmental 1 million watts of solar? Do you have any idea, Michael?
I do. So 2 million watts of solar is about 250 solar systems sold in a year. Each one of those units would represent about 20,000 pounds of carbon emissions that didn't happen. Okay, so I've sold over 1,000 systems myself. My company, Sun Solar Solutions, has sold over 8,000 systems. So there's 8,000 families that have converted to solar in our Arizona market. Each one of those is responsible for having taken 20 plus pounds of carbon emissions out of the atmosphere. In other words, emissions that did not happen. We live in the Arizona market, and so even more, vital, important to that is the water aspect. So every one of those systems also it's enabled us to not pull 250,000 gallons of water out of the ground or out of the reservoirs. So when you live in a desert, water is the limiting factor for growth and for having a healthy local environment. So every solar system deployed will keep us from having to use 7 or 8 million gallons of water over 20 years.
Huh.
And that's epic in the desert.
Yeah. So you're the best citizen on earth.
Yeah, I have never had that thought come into my head, but having you say that out loud is interesting to hear that. I doubt I could make a claim for that, but I'm sure we as a company do those numbers on the 8 million sales, and as as a local community citizen, certainly we feel like as a local corporate citizen that we're really making a huge impact, and that's a big part of our core value. Core values as a company is to really have a meaningful, high magnitude positive impact on our local and global environment.
Are you aware? I mean, you're obviously somewhat aware, and when you got into it, did you think, hey, this is going to help the environment, or were you just looking to sell something and you got pulled in? Or maybe
One of my favorite memories of Tiger Woods was when he was an amateur still, and he had won the U.S. amateur championship. There was a guy standing next to him that was the local, amateur pro, and he just kind of a heavy set guy, good golfer, and he didn't win, but he happened to be on the 18th green when the TV cameras, Tiger, you won the U.S. Open amateur. Hey, and who are you? And they answer, to this guy, and he says, I'm so and so. And they said, what do you do? And he says, I'm in sales. He goes, really? What do you sell? He goes, whatever's moving. So my goal was, oddly enough, I started selling solar in 1983 when it was solar water heaters. I was going to college in California. I did that in 83, 84, made a weird amount of money for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. And I stayed in it while I was in college, but I got out of college, which I was there to learn. I thought in 84, this computer thing might be big. No one knew who Bill Gates really was yet. That turned out to be pretty accurate. Computers turned out to be a big thing. I was there for 25 years. I had a .com that I launched in 2000. And I was in that IT space for about 25 years. But I saw these solar systems in 2012, 13. I see these solar systems just flying up on the roofs. And I know they're a big ticket. I know they're 30 grand, 50 grand, 80 grand, and they're just flying up on the roofs. And I just started, obsessing about it. I would like pull over on the side of the road, or I'd be like, what are you doing? I'm standing there watching, at the back of a street, and there's, 3 houses that have solar out of 10. I'm like, something is going on here. So it was really about finding a big ticket item that was moving like hotcakes. And that's a recipe for me And so I jumped all over it, got involved, and walked away from that whole 25-year corporate IT world, and haven't looked back since.
We were driving back from Watercolor, Florida to Jacksonville, basically a straight shot across the state yesterday. And we saw solar fields just it was like the ocean. It was like you could see that obviously you're driving past it. You start, there's a finish, but when you look out, there was no end. We couldn't see the end. It's like, what's going on with those? Who is installing those or buying those, or what do they power? What's going on? Do you know?
Yeah, so you nailed it. That's utility grade solar, and it's literally companies who now are the modern day power plants, right? So what you saw was a modern day solar power plant. You see the same thing if you see a field of windmills, coming over a hill. That's a modern day power plant. So those might actually be a utility company, or it could be a private individual group that's creating that power and then selling that power directly to utilities.
That's a lot of solar. We also saw solar on billboards, only like 2 or 4
right
panels. That
right.
Josh started spotting it everywhere.
Yep. So that's device solar. Like you could literally put up a little solar kit that would just power your pool. Right?
Yeah.
Put up a couple solar panels. It would power your pool. When the sun's up, your pool would be on. When the sun's down, your pool would be off. And that's a good example of an off-grid, device-specific solar system. And there's a variety of different solar platforms. That's PV solar. We have a big, gigantic utility field here in Arizona that's not PV solar. It's steam engine solar. You'll see this huge utility field, and they're not heating up. They're not, having the sun produce PV photovoltaic energy. What they're doing is they're heating up steam. They're heating up this hydraulic fluid that's going through this, it's going through this half, I'm trying to think of the name, it's kind of this half moon of reflective aluminum. And then there's this bead of hydraulic fluid being pumped through this little steam, and it's heating the fluid up to the point where it actually becomes steam. This hydraulic fluid becomes steam. They use that steam to turn a turbine. The benefit of that is they can heat this fluid up all day, and then that steam is still hot at night, and it's a way to produce solar energy at night. But if you want to join me next time I'm in Vegas, Andrew, if we're there together, we'll go and skydive. I did that recently, my first time, bucket list, checked it off. I'm there at a deal, and a guy says, "Hey, you want to go skydiving?" I'm like, "Well, it's on my bucket list, and I don't have a reason to say no." So I did it. But the flight over Nevada is like, you feel like you're on another planet. You look down and you see so many hundreds and hundreds of acres, thousands of acres covered with a variety of different solar, platforms.
Wow. Okay.
They say that you could power the United States if you were to cover 15% of the state of Nevada in solar panels. So it's doable.
Musk make claims. He's obviously not door knocking, and he's not, I don't know what he's doing. He's busy with the car company, but he makes those big claims. You can power the whole earth.
Yeah.
If you just did one area of solar. Is that, but would everybody need solar, or is that legit? Is that a real claim?
Well, I know what Elon Musk is doing in solar, and that's that he likes to make press announcements, trying to keep his, whatever $1 billion investment that he made acquiring Solar City from going to zero on his balance sheet. So every few months he comes out with a new press announcement. He's great at getting attention on the press, as he should be. He deserves every bit of attention. But in the solar space, he uses that to make yet one more announcement about what they're going to be doing in the residential solar space. Currently, what he's doing to people who respond that want to go solar is he's making them buy a battery, because he's got a battery factory. So that's his current play in the solar space.
He's going to be worth probably $1 trillion in the next 2 to 5 years.
Without solar.
Without solar.
He doesn't need solar, yeah.
But if he got into it, what would he adjust? Is the batteries aren't the big
well, he wasn't it big. So he and a cousin of his started Solar City, and it was a major force in the solar world. And he was knocking on doors, by the way, not Elon, but his cousin. I'd be on one side of the street knocking on doors, and Elon Musk's cousins, Solar City guys, would be on the other side. They were a huge force in the solar world. And for whatever reason, Elon decided to bring it into the fold of Tesla. Now it's Tesla Solar. They fired every human being that worked for the company. They had thousands of people knocking on doors, hundreds of guys in the home selling, and they got rid of every single solitary one of them and thought, no, we can just do this online. I don't think that's gone very well because they were a major force, and now they're practically non-existent in terms of in any local market that I'm in selling solar. So the idea that you can sell solar without humans, that's yet to be proven. They used to sell a lot of solar, and now I don't think they're selling.
Yeah, I agree. The human factor is huge, but also, oh yeah, you get the human factor covered, but do they everybody hops online, right? And they're like, oh, maybe I'll just buy Elon Musk's, or do you see that as any competition, any customers that way, or is that?
Occasionally I have in the past with people who are just super price conscious, but
Yeah.
you have to engineer your own system and then try to buy it online. And you have to go months at a time before you can get anybody onto a phone call to figure out what's going on with your deal. What Tesla's really kind of known for now in the solar world is like 1.5-star reviews. And they're okay with that. They're just big enough where they can handle lots of 1.5-star reviews. I, as a local vendor and a local contractor and a local sales company, I'm moving mountains to make customers super happy and to make sure that I don't have any 1.5-star reviews. So
their
for me, I have a
service.
different approach.
So their service. How's their product?
They don't have a product.
Oh, I thought they
No,
had the
they
battery.
just well, they have a battery, but that's not solar. So that's a whole home backup battery. And it has about 12 kilowatt hours of solar, and it costs about $12,000 to install one. But it doesn't help a solar system save you any money whatsoever. So all a battery does is sit there and wait for the grid to go down, and then you have, about a teaspoon of power on reserve to power your lights and your refrigerator and cell phones, waiting for the grid to come back up. Now, the real great aspect of one of those batteries, and there's lots of batteries, Tesla has one, you can't get it because they're like a lot of Tesla products, they announce it and it's there, but they tell you they can't provide one for 2 years. And that's kind of where we're at with the Tesla batteries. If you sell one, they're going to tell you, we have no idea when we're going to be able to deliver it to you. It's part of Elon Musk's strategy of trying to get 10 years worth of shit done in 2 years. That's like one of his core values. And then if it doesn't work out very well, you will be way better off for having tried to get 10 years worth of stuff done in 2 years. And I get the idea of that strategy, but it ends up having customers going, I want these solar tiles on my roof. And you're like, yeah. Every solar person I talk to, I have to talk to them about solar roof tiles that Tesla talks about all the time, but you can't get them, right? You can't get anyone to find it to install it because it's still years ahead of its time.
Yeah, I think I ordered one of his cars or car, and they were like, yeah, it might be in. I was like, no, what? No, I need it.
Yeah, so they get your $100 deposit right now.
Yeah, they wanted my deposit, and they were like, it might be in, and we might have this feature. And I was like, pass.
So the primary thing that Tesla delivers in the solar space is people their $100 deposit back. So lots of people put down $100 deposits over the years wanting to get a solar system made of these roof tiles. And I guess they were actually going to make the roof tiles. When I say they don't have a product, they were going to make the roof tiles. They have made the roof tiles. They've installed a handful of these roof tiles, but for whatever manufacturing issues and installation issues, it just kind of bogged down and it's just not available from what I can see. But the solar panels, if you bought solar from Tesla, those would be just the standard solar panels that are on everybody else's roof currently. And those I'm pretty sure they buy from distribution like every other solar contractor buys from distribution.
The tiles, are they the same price? Are they more? Are they other than the panels?
It's the same exact stuff as everybody else. Yeah, it's the same tiles. It's the same installation, everything else.
And this is
there's nothing different about other than the fact that they force you to buy a battery, right? So that's their current thing. If you go solar, they're going to force you to buy a battery with the solar, which is going to increase the cost by, $10,000. And that that battery is not going to help the solar system. In most utility markets, that battery is not going to help the solar system create any savings or increased efficiency. What it's going to do is provide you power in the event of a blackout, which is phenomenal in one respect, that most people see a solar system and they think, oh wow, they'd have power in the event of a blackout. Well, that's not true. And so when the grid goes down, solar systems go down because the inverters need a power source. So if you have a battery, whether it's an LG battery or a Tesla battery or any one of the manufacturers that make a battery, if you have that battery, not only will you have power overnight to run a few accessories. Now, a battery backup as part of a solar system or not part of a solar system will run your home in the event of a blackout for a few hours and only a few devices, right? So your 12 kilowatt hours of power is like a teaspoon of power. So it will run a few lights and your refrigerator, your freezer, some outlets for cell phones, things like that. What it won't do is run your air conditioner or your water heater or anything. You would not hook up any of those circuits to a battery because it would run the battery down in an hour, right?
What
So
about
you don't hook up
appliances?
big
What
220
about
loads.
like a refrigerator or
refrigerator? The idea is to keep the power on at your house for a few hours until the grid goes back up. And so you would have the refrigerator, the freezer, you would have lights on, maybe a television. You'd have an emergency load center where you'd have a handful of loads that you absolutely had to have. And you wouldn't have a water heater as one of those, or a air conditioner, or a dryer or an oven or a stove. You'd leave all those stuff out of the emergency load center. Unless maybe you bought 3 or 4 batteries.
Why would anybody want a battery then if it only lasts a few hours?
So here's the key. So if the grid goes down and the grid stays down, when the sun comes up the next morning, the battery will run the solar system. So we'll plug the inverter into the battery so that the next day when the sun comes up, you're generating power off your solar system. That's the amazing thing about having a battery as part of a solar system. So if you have 2 years worth of food in your basement because you're like ready for the zombie apocalypse, or you're ready for North Korea to take the American grid down, or those pesky Russians, if you're worried about those guys, or, like in Texas last year, they had this weather event, this weird ice storm that froze all the windmill, whatever happened. The people who had batteries, they had power all night from the battery, and then they had solar power all day. So that's why you'd want a battery. If you're wanting to be prepared in the event of an outage, whether that's for 20 minutes or 20 days, you want a battery. So if the grid goes down for 20 minutes, you swap right over to power. You'll have power all night. You'll start running out of power at the end of the night, right? 12 kilowatt hours is only a few hours worth of power. But like, say you're running some international server that's keeping your business up, or you've got somebody on life support oxygen in your home, and you can't deal with being down for 20 minutes or 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever, that battery is going to be there for you right now and provide you power for the next few hours, which is, if you have a critical system, then paying 10 grand for that is the right thing to do. And I sell lots of batteries for people who have issues like that. I also sell batteries to people who live in utility districts where the grid goes down a lot. In my home market that I live in, they have 5 nines of uptime, which means they got about 40 minutes of downtime every 2 years, right? So when the grid goes down, typically the grid's back up before you can find the candles, and that happens about every year and a half, right? So do I need a battery? I don't have a battery on my house. I'm not worried about it. Maybe I'm short-sighted, but I just don't feel like the zombie apocalypse is around the corner. But, I know lots of people who are putting huge chunks of their net worth into, guns and ammunition because they feel like, some sort of political, physical, weather, crisis could be around the corner, and they want to be ready and prepared for that. So if that's part of what you need to feel comfortable, you would do it.
Let's say a hurricane hits, right? And the power company not going to be up for 5 days, right? So does so I'm a little confused. The battery is powered. Is that how it works?
No. No, the solar's powered by the battery. So living in a market like Florida, where you have you're always facing an impending event that really could take the grid down for a day or 5. Hurricane, could hit you on any particular year. A battery would provide you with immediate backup power, and then as soon as the sun comes up in the morning, the solar system would now operate. You'd have solar power all day, battery power all night. and the actual solar system would re-top off the battery every day as well. And so depending on how much power you're using and how much power you're going to put into the battery, now you're talking about you'd have to size the system for the right amount of power, right amount of generating power every day, and then how much you're going to be able to store in a day. If you are planning to be ready for that, the normal solar system may not produce enough power in a day to give you the power you need, plus also charge the battery for the next day. So you might want 2 or 3 batteries. If you really want to be prepared, you might have $30,000 or $40,000 worth of battery, but you might also need a solar system that's, say, 50% bigger.
Are there negatives of solar?
Yeah.
Yeah, it works like crap at night. You invest all this money, and all night long it doesn't do nothing.
I'll tell you, I got solar lights at my house. I love them.
Uh-huh.
Put them on the garage, and you just walk by them, and
Yep.
they're brilliant.
So I was being a little, a little bit of tongue in cheek there, Josh. Obviously, yeah. So people ask me what's the bad part about solar. I'd say they suck at night, right? They don't do nothing. So that is an issue. So you're always having to be connected to the grid. Solar is not a way with now in the future when the batteries get real. The batteries are not real yet. I mean, they're real and they're there, but they literally hold a teaspoon of power. So if you had, say, 100 kilowatt hours, which right now would be $100,000 worth of batteries, you could start to think about getting off the grid. So the bad part about solar is there's no way to get off the grid, right? So you always have to be grid tied to make a residential solar system work, unless you're like out in the boonies and then they don't have power to your, that's not an option to be on the grid. It's going to cost you $100,000 to get the utility company to bring power out there. Then you might be off grid solar, and then you're just going to deal with however much power you have is how much power you have, and however much money batteries will be how much power you have overnight and in the event that the sun is not out and producing. Yeah, no sun, no power.
You said, Mike, would you say how storage used to be for computers? Like you used to have these huge warehouses of storage, right?
Yeah.
And now,
yes.
Little thing. Is that like a fair comparison?
Yes. Yeah, 1992, I was selling IBM mainframes, and one of my accounts was Pan Am, and I used to go call on them in Midtown Manhattan, and they were in a huge high-rise. What's that?
The airline, Pan Am?
The airline. Yep. Yeah, so they were headquartered in Manhattan, and I used to call on them and be trying to get them to buy the latest version of equipment, and they literally had like 4 floors of a Manhattan high-rise in raised floor space that was covered in these devices that each individually looked like a refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be hundreds of these devices on each floor. And what those devices were storage devices, right? We called them DASD, disk access storage devices. On another floor, they had all these tape machines where they were backing that up and putting that information onto tape. In the likely event that that whole storage array would go down, they could restore from backup tape. And that took multiple floors of real estate to create what I now have 10x of memory and storage in this device. And so that is a lot like what storage is like. So you have a solar system that's producing 20,000 kilowatts. In order to be off grid, I need thousands of kilowatt hours in the summertime that I produce in the winter. In Arizona, we produce a lot of power in the winter, and we need that power in the summer when the air conditioner is going to be on. Well, there is no place to put that. Batteries are not a solution to do that. Why? Because a $12,000 battery holds 12 kilowatt hours. So what we really need is a $10,000 battery that holds, maybe 500 kilowatt hours to get us off of the grid. And is that coming? Absolutely. There's billions of dollars. And this is one of the things I love about Elon Musk is he's investing into the future, that giga plant thing that he has that produces batteries. What we're seeing right now is in storage and batteries is the 286 processor, right? And what's coming is the Pentium, right? The Pentium chip will be here for storage. And I don't know if that's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. In the short term, that sounds like a long time. If you look at things over the long term, that's happening in pretty short period of time. So yeah, in a short period of time, if you're looking at the long run, we will have, and they're looking at crazy things like being able to turn dry lake beds into a battery. Can you turn a dry lake bed into a battery? So there's all sorts of ways to store energy. You could use solar energy to drive a propeller up 1,000-yard screw, and then at night when the sun goes down, let that screw fall back down, right? There's lots of ways to take energy and convert it into something you can use at night. I was talking about that other solar field that produces steam instead of PV solar, and then they let that steam out at night and produce solar power. That's a way to store energy from the day into the night. So there's billions and billions of dollars trying to figure out, how can we generate solar energy and have it available some other time and some other place.
All right, I wrote down a few, but if our Edison were here today, what would they, was solar existing back then? When was it invented?
Well,
what is the back? Like,
if you want, if you want to go and take it into that context, literally every bit of energy that we have on this planet is solar energy, right? Maybe with the possible exception of that molten lava core at the center of the Earth, which we also use in creating geothermal heat and things like that. So maybe geothermal, and maybe that molten core came from the sun somewhere. But all plants that turn into carbon stuff that we dig out of the ground, our primary method of powering the planet right now is we dig garbage out of the ground, right? Stuff that died, eons ago. And when we light that on fire, that's the current way we power our cars and our homes, is we dig coal, we dig oil, we get it out of the ground. Our next big plan is to, replace that with getting gas out of the ground and lighting that on fire. So, excuse me, because of the climate change issues that we're having, we've just discovered it's kind of a bad idea to find garbage and light it on fire to create our power. And so now we're going to these other sources. So Edison and those guys were trying to say, how do we get off of whale oil, right? Literally, how do we transition lighting our homes from whale oil to be able to distribute this current over these wires with direct current or alternating current? So the real Tesla and Edison were having a big fight about whether we'd go with alternating current or direct current after we burned stuff at a power plant and created this current. So, but the stuff that they were burning and the stuff that we're burning today is actually, fossil fuels or whatever whatever that carbon material is, all came from solar energy.
I'm a little confused. It came from solar. It came from setting that. It came from.
Yeah, but the carbon material all came out of the solar energy creating plants to grow, which caused animals to eat the plants. So every bit of energy we have on this planet is all solar energy being converted from one form to another form to another form, with the exception of maybe geothermal and then also nuclear. I would say maybe we have nuclear power that comes from elements that weren't initially solar power. That might be another area, but everything else is converting primarily solar power into one form or another that then turns into the energy that we needed. The beautiful thing about solar power is instead of going through all these, eon iterations of creating plant material and whatnot, and turning it into carbon, and then burning the carbon, the solar PV is we're directly transferring solar energy directly into the power source that we need.
So circling back to negatives, does solar, is that you're saying it sucks at night? So it doesn't.
No sun, no solar. Yeah. So that is the downside of solar. So currently,
I can still turn the light, like in the house.
Not from solar power, not unless you have a battery. Right.
Is it
so
possible
every time,
for solar to for like different parts of the world? It's not sunny in Arizona, but it could be sunny.
From a residential solar standpoint, no, right? Yeah. So I'm in the business of putting solar onto individual residences and rooftops. So one of the problems that the current electrical grid has is that it was designed for centralized power distribution. And so we have big power plants, which gets transmitted over the big grid, and that power cascades down. You can't produce power at a local resident and have thousands of people creating power that's been created at individual residences and have that cascade upward and serve the bigger grid. That is until we fix the grid, right? So now the utility grade solar are big, gigantic solar fields that are sitting out there. They're already on the grid. So they're onboarding that power onto the bigger grid. And then that power is being distributed around the grid. And I don't know if you ever talked to anybody that works for like a WAPA, Western Area Power Association. You're talking the big grid. Those are the guys that are moving power around the country and the world and whatnot. But there's a lot of limitations. But there's no way when power is made, it has to be made. It has to be used instantaneously. There's no place to put it. There are no batteries. There is no storage in the grid.
The battery doesn't store it, is what you're saying.
Battery stores power, but currently we only have batteries that can hold teaspoons full of power. Yeah, so we currently have local utilities that are building some battery fields and they're blowing up and they have all sorts of issues. So batteries are still extremely limited. We don't have any place to put enough power to operate the country tomorrow. Well, then, like we can't store tomorrow's power. We have to make tomorrow's power tomorrow.
Yeah, so you're saying basically when you flick this switch, it goes to the grid, right?
Correct. So if you're selling a residential solar system, it has to be grid tied. Okay. Which means that there's a combination of solar power and grid power operating the home.
How do those ones you put on garage or those floodlights that are, if they collect it during the day, then how does night? How does that
battery? So that little floodlight system has a little tiny solar panel and it has a little battery system in there. So all the solar's doing is charging the battery every day and it discharges every night. So in essence, when you're selling, when consumers have a solar system on their house, they're using the grid as a battery. So typically the solar system is producing a significantly amount of power that's in excess of what the consumer needs for that particular day while the sun is out. And there's no battery to put that power into. In most, I'd say 99% of solar systems have no battery. So where that power goes is gets metered into the grid. It gets metered through the utility back onto their local grid system. The local utility credits the customer for that power. And so think of everybody with a solar system as having two meters. One is the meter they're buying power with at night. But when the sun's up, they're producing more power than they need, and they're selling that battery, that excess power back to the grid. And so there's a whole process called net metering or net billing, where you're getting credit for all your power. So you make too much power in the day, and you give the excess to the utility, and at night you meter that power back in, but you use the credits that you generated during the day to pay for that power at night. In Arizona, we use very little power all winter long. We have massive sunshine, and just like Florida, we have massive amounts of sunshine, but we don't need any air conditioning all winter long. And so we way massively overproduce. We meter all of that power into the grid in the winter. Then in the summer, when we're dealing with sweltering heat, and we still have lots and lots of solar power, but now we're maybe making 40%, 50%, 60% of the power we need to run our air conditioners. So we use that 40-50% direct from solar, but then we import the balance of the power we need from the utility, and we pay the utility for that imported power with the energy that we generated in the wintertime. And so there's this constant process of buying power, selling power, buying power, selling power. So I'm kind of joking when I say the thing that sucks about solar is that it doesn't work at night. Well, that requires you to be tied to the grid so that you can make too much power in the day, put it into the grid, and then use that power at night or during the peak season when you need it. So in essence, now it's not an actual battery, but consumers that have solar are using the grid as a battery system. They're storing energy. We convert it into credits or actually into cash, and then we use those credits or cash to buy that power back from the grid when we need it. As long as we make the same amount of power as we use, we'll end up about even with the utility, except they'll have to charge us, $20 a month, $30 a month to be a customer and be tied to the grid. They'll charge you some fees and stuff, but you can generate enough power so that you plus and minus and get to zero with the
Elon is
utility.
investing in the future of battery.
When he gets to
He's in the battery business. Yeah.
he puts out a battery company.
I'm sorry, Josh.
Tesla's a battery company, not.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They're a battery company. So they've got his giga plant in Nevada. It's like the biggest building in the world now, or something like that. That plant produces batteries for his cars, and then they're like, well, it works so good for the cars, and now you'll see Ford is advertising, hey, buy our Lightning Ford truck, and it can power your house if the grid's down. Well, yeah, you just plug your house into the battery that's in your electric vehicle. And if the grid were down, you could use that power that's in the battery that's in that vehicle to run the house for a few hours.
So when he gets further along, that's interesting, weird. But if he gets batteries, the batteries will become more valuable, and the energy would potentially get stored on a way to get rid of the grid. Is what I'm getting at, right?
No,
never.
Not in the near future.
Yeah.
If you weren't connected to the grid, every single facility, home, business, power, factory, whatever, every single business would have to make precisely the amount of power that's needed right now. Solar systems are good at producing lots of kilowatt hours. Solar systems are pretty inadequate for producing the correct amount of demand. Demand is how much power your home or your business needs right this very second. Well, solar just makes what it makes, right?
But doesn't the
so
battery?
Unless you have a very powerful.
Doesn't the battery store it though?
Yes.
Are batteries be able to store it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but then you would also need to be able to produce enough power for that property, no matter what. So, I mean, in the future, you should be able to engineer a solar system and a battery system that makes that property independent. Yes, the answer to that is yes.
So
we're not there yet.
Right. Whenever he gets to that battery, I'm saying with the processors, like the, storage wise and computers, maybe 10, 20 years, I guess, the home could be independent and potentially off the grid.
Correct. You can do it now. It just take a lot of money, and you need to fill up you need to turn your garage into a battery cube. And you'd need, you need $500,000 maybe worth of batteries in your garage.
Right.
And then you could unconnect from the grid, except oops, they won't let you. So in most residential areas, there's either a code or legislation, there's a rule that says if you're going to occupy a house, part of the certificate of occupancy is you must be connected to the grid. Now, obviously, if that becomes a non-requirement, it doesn't become essential, maybe they'll drop that as a requirement. But in the community I live in, they won't let you occupy a home and not be continually connected to the grid. And that's because if they let people do that, they'd be cooking with charcoal and heating their homes with wood and, all sorts of, medieval ways to power a home. And then next thing you know, you'd be like living in a camp, right? Everybody's powering with cook stoves and generators, and it'd be like living in a trailer camp.
What happens when you're done with solar, Michael? Solar to the end.
Yeah, I think this is so. I'm in a company that's producing about 20 million watts of solar sales per year. We see that growing over the next 5 years to 100 and 500 megawatts of solar. Only 4% of the homes in the United States, probably less than that, probably 4% of the addressable homes in the United States already have solar power. Solar for homes is producing, homeowners are producing about 2/3 of the emissions. And President Biden has said, the goal for the United States is to reduce our emissions in half by the end of this decade. So what that tells me is we're going to be really, really, really busy over the next decade, taking homes and converting them over to solar power so that we can reduce emissions. And there's kind of a two-part plan for that. Right now, there's massive, massive incentives. So if you were to buy a solar system, most of the solar systems that I put on families' homes today, the government, the federal government, puts in somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 in literally cash credit back to the customer. They get a tax credit that increases their tax rebate or decreases their tax liability dollar for dollar. So, if you went solar this year, you'd be getting a $12,000, $15,000 check from the government this, January, February, March when you do taxes.
Money just get paid automatically. Boom. Just like that.
Boom, zero down. Yeah, and that's how solar is sold. It's zero down. There's no money out of pocket. You don't give me $1, and in February, the government's going to hand you $12,000 in the form of a tax credit. That's going to turn into cash. And then you can apply that to the solar, or you can put it into your 401k. That's the incentive side of solar. And then there's state credits too. In Arizona, the state gives you a $1,000 tax credit as well to incentivize.
It goes in my pocket, right? Solar. It goes in my pocket. But how internationally? You were out of the country recently. How is this a thing in other countries? Is this how is this perceived globally?
Well, globally, the reason that this is going to be, prolific is not because of incentives. So the tax credit that I just described is, I don't know if it's unique, but it's specific to the United States. Do they have that same tax credit system in Mexico? No, they don't. They have a lot more solar energy and they have a lot less solar power because they don't have the government incentivizing it in the same way. Solar is at a point now where if you didn't have any incentives, it would probably take you about 11 or 12 years to break even. In other words, get your return of your capital back.
But what I'm getting at is credit, England or Australia or Germany countries pushing it, or is this popular? Where are we?
Yeah, I mean, it's being installed. It's being installed worldwide. Yeah, these panels are made in all over the world. They're installed all over the world. Solar's huge in Australia. It's pretty prolific in Europe. I think the incentives in Europe are probably better than they are in the United States because a solar system in Europe will produce less power. I think it needs a higher government subsidy to make financial sense for a homeowner. But each individual local utility is setting the ground rules for how solar gets connected and compensated for from a credit system back and forth. There's no universal, even in the United States, how the utility is going to credit you. So every single solitary address in the United States has a specific utility, usually a monopoly, and then that utility, along with whatever governs that monopoly, is dictating what the credit system is for that power back and forth. Then it's the state by state government in the United States that's creating the state incentives, which in Arizona is a fixed $1,000, and then the federal incentive, which is 26% of the system cost. So, if you had a $100,000 solar system, you'd get $26,000 from the federal government. That's going to be different in every single country to country. What's going to be the same everywhere is that the cost of fossil fuel power is going to go up dramatically in the next 10, 15 years. Historically, the cost of kilowatt hours has gone up, pretty consistent with inflation, a little bit more than inflation because you got all these regulations and exploration and all this other stuff to dig stuff out of the ground and light it on fire. So it's a little bit higher than the rate of inflation, typically around 4%. Well, now we don't have regular inflation now, do we? We're dealing with inflation that, appears to be double what's normal. Is that transitory? Is it going to last for a long time? Nobody has any idea. When I flew over the Gulf of Mexico and saw thousands of container ships sitting out on the Gulf of Mexico, I'm thinking, this thing we could be in somewhat of a crisis mode for a while, right? We keep thinking, okay, we're at the end of this crisis. Crises are what, really drive the price of things to go up. So we're in this elongated crisis that is causing this inflation. But what's really going to drive the entire planet to go solar is this understanding that climate change is an existential threat and we need to address that existential threat. The way we're going to address it, the way governments incentivize behavior is twofold. One, with incentives, and we just talked about the tax credit. That has a nominal effect. That gets all the really, really smart people, all the wise people. It gets the early adopters. It gets the people that are like out there, out front. It gets the pioneers, etc. But it doesn't make the herd move, right? You want a herd to move. the carrot doesn't work. You want the herd to move, you need the stick. And so the stick is coming, right? The herd will go solar, and the herd, meaning the massive population around the globe, they're going to go solar because the price of fossil fuels is going to double or triple.